Hello and good afternoon. My name is Anna Thomas, and I am the outreach manager with Moms in Motion. And I am super excited to introduce you to our special guest today, Mr. John Malone, and he is the Director of Developmental Services at the Harrisonburg-Rockingham Community Services Board. And he is going to help us demystify the DD waiver today and answer questions that a lot of our viewers and families that we serve have submitted, as well as some of our staff members. And so welcome, John, and we thank you again for being here. And you are going to start off with telling us a little bit about the DD waiver, and then we will jump into some of the questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. So this is, this seems like a well-practiced speech, it's because it is. This is my boilerplate. What is the DD waiver, sort of for beginners? And so here it goes. Ready? So the model for Virginia, it used to be that if you had a developmental disability and you could not care for yourself or live independently, and you could no longer live with your family members, that the state had an obligation, or the Commonwealth had an obligation, to serve you in one of the large state institutions that we had. There were 5 of them. In fact, when I started, all 5 were still in operation. There was Northern Virginia, Southern Virginia, Central Virginia Training Center, Eastern Virginia Training Center. These were large college campus type buildings with hundreds of people that lived on these campuses. You had dormitories, you had day support buildings, you had cafeterias, you had medical centers. Right. So, for example, in Lynchburg, and you still visit there, large college campus. So that was the model. Let's say you're 26 years old, you had a developmental disability, you cannot live. Let's say your caregiver gets sick. The state says, if there's no other options, we have to serve you in the training center. No ifs, ands, or buts. Around 1990, Virginia, along with other Commonwealth, other states at the time, said, okay, what we are going to do is, instead of using the money to pay for Joe to go to the training center or an institution, we'll use those funds to pay, we'll attach those funds to Joe, and we'll let him pay private providers to live as independently as possible in the community. And he'll use those funds to pay, like Joe may need, he may need to live in a group home with 24 care support. So that's what it'll pay for. And he also may go to a day support. And so that's what it'll pay for. Whereas Mary, she can live independently, but she just needs someone to come and make sure she takes her medicine a couple of days a week. And she can work, but she just needs some kind of supported employment. So she uses those funds to pay for those services. So all the services are different. So anytime we talk about waiver funds, and the term is you cannot intuit what waiver means, but I'm saying I think it actually means that we are waiving some part of the regs, meaning that Medicaid services can be applied differently to different people. That's where the term waiver comes in, but it means really nothing to you and I. So anytime you hear people talk about waiver, all we're talking about are funds that are designed to keep people out of institutional level of care. So everything that we do basically is taking those institutional funds, allowing people with developmental disabilities to access them, and then pay for private providers. Again, when I started, some people were still going into institutions, and we can get into this later, but as part of the settlement agreement, they closed them all down. So all our entire service model now is based on these waivers and providing the opportunity for people to live as independently as possible and in the most integrated way possible. So that's my boilerplate. What are waivers? And I may be answering some questions here ahead of time, but that's fine. So just really quick, when I started, we had one waiver. It was called the ID waiver when we started, and that paid for everything. That paid for, like when I said, some people just need group homes, some people need some sort of independent living supports. There was just one waiver for that. And then in 2016, as part of the settlement agreement, they split them into different waivers, which is where you hear the BI waiver and the FIS waiver and the community living waiver, and made things much more confusing for people to figure out on a day-to-day basis. So that's our current state is we try to get people connected to those certain waivers and to get them to live as independently as possible. Happy to answer questions on that, or just keep moving on through the questions.
Yeah, you're good. That was great. That was great. Definitely a little brief rundown on what the DD waiver is and who it is
Mhm.
meant to serve. My next question for you, and you definitely hit on this, but the different types of waiver options under the DD waiver and their qualifications. Can you tell us a little bit about what might qualify someone for those different DD waivers that you were mentioning?
Sure. So again, there's three different waivers under the DD waiver, and this started in 2016. So this is part of the waiver redesign. The building independence waiver, the family and individual supports waiver, and the community living waiver. The reason they did this, or one of the main reasons they did this, is for cost, because when we used to give people just a waiver that had all of those services, what the General Assembly had to do is they had to budget for the most services that the person would use, and congregate residential was the most expensive. So for every one of those waiver slots, they had to make sure that if the person eventually needed it, it could pay for community living. So they targeted a little bit and said, you know what, if you only need sort of day employment services or day services and maybe some minimal independent living services, we have something called a BI waiver for you. And that will only pay for those services, and it will not pay for more robust residential services or whatnot. Or if you need additional supports, like supported living or any other of the other employment services or day sports services, but you don't need group home services, then that's what's available in the family and individual supports waiver. If you need everything, then that's what the community living waiver is for. And so a majority of the slots that we get when they reallocate slots these days are that middle tier, the family and individual supports, because we have a lot of people that need just respite services or some sort of day activity or whatnot, and that really serves their needs. In fact, they don't offer that community living, the big one that has the group home services. They don't even offer that now unless you show that you need group home immediately, like that you've identified that you need a group home immediately. Those are really just designed for people that need that level of care almost immediately. In terms of the qualifications or whatnot, so the front end is the same for everybody, and I'll get into that just a little bit. So in order to receive a waiver in Virginia, you need to meet three criteria. First is diagnostic. Okay, you have to have a developmental disability. That's again, when I started, it was just intellectual disability, but they've expanded it to the entire definition of developmental disability. And in Virginia code, it is, if I can remember, it is that is a severe chronic mental or physical impairment that is present at birth or during the developmental period that is likely to continue and results in deficits in three or more major life areas like independent living, financial independence, and whatnot. Again, when I started, it was just intellectual disabilities. Now that encompasses cerebral palsy. It could be fetal alcohol syndrome. Autism is the main one. Most of our clientele is ID and autism is who we serve. So the front end is you have to have a documented diagnosis, psychological or developmental assessment or something. That's the first part. Secondly, is you have to meet functional eligibility. So even if you have an intellectual disability, you need to meet the institutional level of care, because if you remember what I said earlier, these funds are institutional designated funds. So you have to meet that level of care. The way we do that is every CSB will do what's called a VIDES. And if you have anybody listening that is on waiver, you've done VIDES every year. And that just determines, okay, how much help does the person need with their medication? How much help do they need getting dressed? Do they have behavioral issues? Do they have mobility issues? All of that. If they meet a certain threshold for meeting institutional level of care, that's the second thing. And thirdly, they need to meet financial Medicaid eligibility. Most of the time, that's not an issue for our clients. For children, they don't look they don't look so normally they'll look at a child, they'll look at the family's income. And so a lot of times that'll bump people out. When they get a waiver slot, they just look at the child's income. And of course, the child's income, unless they're a child actor, is probably going to qualify. So you need those three things. And so that's how everybody gets access to the waiver. And then once you get on the waiting list, everyone sort of looks the same. The main difference of the three waivers is that the BI waiver is for people 18 or older. That is really the only difference. There is no minimum age requirement for waiver. We are able to do screenings. That VIDES that I mentioned that does the functional eligibility. We do one specifically for adults, one specifically for children, and there is one specifically for infants as well, which is a pretty low threshold to meet if you think of a typical infant in terms of their independent living skills. So there is no minimum age limit, but I think 3 years old was the youngest we've ever given somebody a waiver slot, and that was pretty unique. A lot of those kids are going to be served through the Infant Toddler Connection Part C service, and not necessarily through waivers.
Okay.
So that is really, those are the main qualifications. And I jumped ahead to your second question. I'm sorry. The age requirements. The BI waiver is the only one that has that age requirement of 18. And there is no maximum age, and you don't lose your waiver slot unless you decide you no longer want the service, you stop accepting the service, or if you leave the state or die, obviously. But if you, and not leave the state like on vacation, I mean leave the state like for good, they'll take your slot away.
All right.
And I'm going to let you answer the question, so I'm going to keep just jumping ahead and answering.
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. And so just to reiterate, for the age requirements, as long as the individual had been diagnosed with a developmental disability or delay, by which age would they qualify? Is there a certain age for that part?
So when I started, we almost never got kids with an autism diagnosis under 6. And that, I don't know if that was a rule or what it was, but that is changing. We are getting autism diagnosis for a 4 or 5 year old. And of course, they're not going to give an intellectual disability for a 4 or 5 year old typically. But you can get that global development delay from birth, pretty early. And that is a qualifying diagnosis for us. That will change at 6 once that global development delay. Once that we have to figure out, okay, what is the next diagnosis that we're looking for? A lot of times it will go from global delay to intellectual disability. But as long as, like, we have tons of people on the waiting list that are under 6 that are there because of global development delay. So.
Okay. All right. And you touched on this, but I'll reiterate it as well, because it's always a question that families have when it comes to waivers, and that's that financial requirement. And like you said, I say often, most of the individuals, if they're a child, then they're going to qualify for the waiver. Unlike traditional Medicaid, where they look at the whole family's income, they are looking at that individual's. And so you said, unless they're a child star or something, and I often say, unless they're a TikToker or an Instagram sensation. So unless they have employment and have income coming in, usually they don't have any income coming in. So they're going to qualify based on their need alone, which is a great thought about these programs that we help individuals with, is that they're qualifying based on their need, and it's not looking at that financial aspect for the whole family. And so we're able to get services to people that really need them, no matter the financial status of the whole family. So that's a great thing. And I'll just reiterate that, because it's often something that people don't think about, and they think they wouldn't qualify, and so they won't even look into the waiver programs. So,
and to piggyback, they don't just get Medicaid for that service. They get Medicaid for any service that Medicaid will pay for, which is a lot. So
yes. So opens up all the doctor's appointments, medications, therapies, things that they maybe didn't have access to before, and then a bunch of more benefits as well. So My next question was, what should someone do if they want to be screened or they think that their loved one needs to be screened? What should be their first step that they should take?
So that is going to really depend on the CSB.
Okay.
Wherever your locality is. What is universal is that the CSB is the gateway to waiver all throughout Virginia. So you have to go through the CSB to get screened. I will give you an example. So for us, for our CSB, we have a screening request form that we have on our website that we will send out to people. We try to make it very, very simple so that they basically just give us your basic contact information. But what they should do on the front end, because it's really going to slow things down if they don't, is documentation of diagnosis. Because if you come to us and you say, my son has autism, and we want to get him screened for the waiver, we'll say, great, fill out this form, get it back to us with the documentation. It happens more often with intellectual disabilities, because they'll say, my child has an intellectual disability, we want to get screened, and the documentation does not support that. It might be a learning disability, it might have other things, or they just might not have enough documentation. Like they may actually have the diagnosis but not have the documentation. We're going to have to get that anyway. So we say it's much, much easier for you to get it and bring it to us than us to try to track it down. So if you can get that ahead of time, for us, it's just call us or go on the website. For other CSBs, I'm sure they have something on their website that says call, whatever. I'm sure you can just call the main number, and if you just say, my son needs to be screened for the DD waiver, who can you connect me to? And people do it different ways. The way we do it is we do a lot of going out into people's homes, especially with kids. It's much easier that way. And then doing the screening there takes about an hour. And then at the end of that, we'll know, okay, your son qualifies, and then we will go ahead and place them on the waiting list. But again, everything gets tripped up if we don't have
the right diagnosis documentation.
Yeah, we have. If everything goes smoothly, it goes right on through. But we've got stacks of people that were like, well, I called them and we're waiting on the doctor, or we're waiting on this, and they just sit there until we can get it clarified.
That's right. And I know with pediatrics in our area, specifically, if someone's waiting for an appointment with developmental peds at UVA, the wait list can be rather long for that appointment to get those diagnoses. So they need to make sure that they have already done that step first, and that will help them out a lot. That's great to know.
We get a lot of our psychologicals through the school, of course, but even those sometimes don't say intellectual disability, because the school's doing their psychological for their purpose, which I totally get. They're not doing it for us, like to give a certain diagnosis. And so sometimes we have to go back to the school and say, can you do an addendum and clarify? If they are past school age, anybody can go on the phone book and say, I need a psychological completed, and then you've got to pay for it. So, and sometimes it's months and months out before people can do it. So, we're saying the same thing, but get that part done.
Definitely. So, all right. So now the individual has been screened with y'all. They have went through the screening process. They've provided all the documentation. And now if they were approved, then they're added to a wait list. And so what does that mean for them that now they've been added to the wait list? How do they make sure they stay on the wait list? And are there any benefits while they're on that wait list?
Gotcha. So another thing I usually tell everybody as part of this boilerplate thing is the waiting list should not be called a waiting list anymore.
Okay.
Because especially on the DD side, really quick backstory. Before 2016, there was a DD waiting list and an ID waiting list, two totally separately managed entities, and private agencies managed that whole DD case management and all that stuff. They merged them all in 2016. The waiting list for the DD waivers for people with autism was a chronological waiting list. So you got on that list, you were number 827. And then when slots were given out, you were 826, 825, and you can watch, we're almost at the top. We've been on here for 4 years. We're almost at the top. The ID waiting list at the time could much more be accurately described as a pool. It's a pool of applicants. You go and find a priority. you're assigned what's called a critical needs score, and then whoever decides, there's a committee, a volunteer committee that decides who needs it the most. All they're looking at is who needs it the most. They don't even know who's been on there longer or whatnot. So you can be in that pool for 10 years or 10 days. It does not matter. I think the shortest non-emergency one, someone was in there for like 4 days and they got a slot because they needed it the most. But again, there have been people on there that have been on there for years and years and years. When they combined the two, they did away with a chronological and they made everything needs-based. So our waiting list now all throughout the entire state is needs-based. So everybody that's currently on the waiting list has a priority 1, 2, or 3 score. And that's all based on, there's very specific things, but really it just means like, how much do you need the slot right now? Are there significant medical or behavioral issues going on? Are there medical issues by the caregiver that are like, this person needs a slot right away? Those are all priority 1s. Everyone else is down priority 2 and priority 3. And then we have a waiver slot allocation committee, which is a volunteer committee. We don't run it. It's run by the department. And when slots become available, excuse me, that committee looks at people in our waiting list and decides who it is who needs that slot the most. To make things a little bit more complicated, a little bit more in the weeds, I'm sorry, but they don't even look at all the priority 1s on our waiting list. They only look at the people that have the highest, let's say 10 critical needs scores. So whenever slots become available, we look at everybody that's priority 1. We do a critical needs score, which will be anywhere from like 5 to 30, whatever the scoring is, right? And then they'll say, okay, everyone 30 from 26 and above, we'll look and see they will be, in the pool. And then they pick from that pool. They don't even pick from the pool of all priority 1s, and they certainly don't pick from the pool of priority 1s, 2s, and 3s. So it's only the top half of that priority 1s that get selected. That's what being on the waiting list is. And when we do the screening, we look at we determine what the priority is. And then when slots become available, usually the service coordinator will reach out to the family and say, hey, has anything changed? Because a lot of times these people are not getting active case management. So we don't talk to them that much. And we can get into that in a minute. But so we'll say, hey, tell us about your current situation. I need to do your critical needs score. And then we submit those. And then again, that top percentage of folks get it. So that's how the waiting list is managed, not just with us, but for everybody. It's 3 priorities, and then the top critical needs score gets it. You should, they don't like to remove people from the waiting list. I will say years ago, each CSB managed the waiting list themselves. And a couple of years ago, DBHDS took over management of that, of keeping people on the waiting list. And what they said they were going to do is they were going to contact everybody on the waiting list. So if anybody is on the waiting list, DBHDS has your mailing address. If you have one, they have your email address, and they will send you, hey, we need you to contact us to make sure that you're still on the waiting list. They've changed how that works a couple of times, but in principle, DBHDS is going to be contacting you. So check your mail. Don't throw out mail from DBHDS. Check your spam. Check your filters for DBHDS to see if they're trying to contact you. And they will give you chance. So like they say, hey, we contacted them. We didn't hear from them. Here's when we sent the second letter. Here's where we sent the third letter that says we're going to remove you. Some people totally legit that they're removed, like they don't want anything, or for whatever reason, maybe they moved out of the state, but they never told anybody, so they remove them from the waiting list. But every once in a while, we do get folks that are in a panic because they are just getting that third letter that's saying I'm getting removed from the waiting list, or we get so we'll get notifications before they remove somebody, and we can also reach out to them and say, hey, we've not heard anything. You're going to get removed from the waiting list. So that you can stay on the waiting list just by just making sure that you're sending in anything that they send you. Just be on the lookout for those. You can also call your local CSB and just say, "Hey, I haven't heard anything. I'm nervous. I'm going to get taken off." And your second question there: are there benefits for being on the waiting list? I mean, there's really one specific benefit that you probably know about, the IFSP funds. That also started around 2016, and they have again changed how they do that several different times. It is now through a portal that and it is first come, first serve, and it's a certain amount of money, not a lot, but for anybody on the waiting list, they can, let's say, get in that portal and apply for it. And you can use that money to build a fence, to build a ramp, for dental services, for whatever. And just as long as you can justify it and submit for it. And then they will approve it on both first come, first serve, and by legitimacy. You can't buy, a refrigerator, but, and then I think they do cards now that they will send you to do it, and you can use that. So anybody, so when I put people on the waiting list, after I tell them all the bad news, like, okay, you're not going to get a service right away and all that stuff in priority 1, 2, and 3, they say, well, why would I even do it? I say, number one, we need the General Assembly to know how many people are waiting.
That's right.
Because if you're not on the waiting list, they don't know who they are, and they can not budget for and be like, hey, we're serving everybody that needs anything. So that's number one. And then the second thing is those IFSP funds is, and you can just, if you're on the waiting list and you don't know about it, you can really just Google IFSP funds, DBHDS, and you'll find out information on how to get there.
Great. And we always try to share whenever it's time for those IFSP funds to be spread out. And we share the link to the portal and everything. So just be on the watch for that. And we will make sure to share again this year whenever it's time. Well, thank you. That was a lot of information.
Is that the fall? Is usually then they do it in the fall?
I do believe it's around the fall time. Yes, that's right. So I'll try to get that pulled, and we'll link it in this, in the comments in this video as well, for individuals to have that portal, information and be able to stay up to date on that. Our next, question, I'm going to, skip one because we kind of started dabbling into the priority one wait list. And so that is a hot topic right now with legislation. And you were talking about the General Assembly, and everyone has seen in the news about priority one wait list being funded. And so we want to see if you can offer some insight and explain to us and the families we serve what exactly that means. Does that mean that they're all getting a waiver right away, or how does that work? In your best knowledge, what do you think is going to happen?
They are certainly not going to dump all of the priority one slots on the service community. We would not be able to handle it. CSBs would not probably be able to handle all of those. You guys probably would not be able to handle all of those. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but it's a lot.
That's right.
So our understanding is they are rolling these out. I believe, well, I don't believe, I looked it up. I'm sorry. 3,500 folks probably right now statewide that are on the, on priority one wait list. What's almost certainly going to happen is they're going to give us X amount of slots in July. And my guess is about 6 months later, they might roll out some more slots to try to start churning out these. My guess is also they seem to think that the service community will be able to absorb them. I'm up in the air about that, quite honestly. There have been people that have gotten slots that are still we've never been able to fill their need. Even if they get connected with you guys or anybody else, trying to get actual workers sometimes is difficult.
That's right.
So I am eternally optimistic about funding the priority one waiting list. Absolutely. Let's fund the whole waiting list. That would be great. And I'll continue to be optimistic, but we really need to make sure those services are there for folks. Harrisonburg-Rockingham does not have a lot of residential services right now for folks. We have people moving out of the area for some residential services. As you know, personal assistance and respite. Well, agency-directed personal assistance and respite, forget it. And we're not finding any of those around here. But even consumer-directed are difficult to find.
That's right.
So, I mean, the good news is this is real. This is not a rumor anymore. They are funding the priority one waiting list. How that rolls out, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, and there'll probably be some fits and starts, is my guess. But I think ultimately this is good news for folks. I will temper that by being old and working here for 24 years. Man, we're going to backfill that up pretty quick. We've given out slots years and years and years and years, and the list just keeps growing and growing and growing. Like we've done I don't know, a ton of assessments in the past year about getting people on the waiting list, which is great because they're eligible for it. But the list keeps growing and growing. So good news, good thing. It's going to be very difficult, I think. And my guess is they'll be phasing these over the next year or so to get all of these up and running. So that's my best answer.
Yes, that's right. And just to add a little insight onto what John was talking about with the providers, as far as even the support coordinators, the service facilitators, and agency-directed services and consumer-directed services, not having the provider capacity to be able to take on that many individuals and provide great services to them at one time. That is what he is mentioning, and that is whenever you see our emails about reaching out to your legislators and asking for increased funding and increased opportunities for individuals with these services. That is why we are doing that, is because we need to build the provider capacity up in order for individuals to be able to have these services and be able to have access to them, not just get a waiver, but have access to being able to use that waiver. And so it's still very important that we reach out to our legislators and tell them about the needs. And so thank you for your insight on that one. And that was my little tagline for that, is that we definitely need to continue to advocate in all ways. So
it's always a little delicate, because we never want to seem like we're not advocating for more slots.
That's right.
We never want to communicate that. So please give us all the slots. But
Yes, definitely. We're advocating on both fronts. We want to serve the people and be able to serve more of them. So, all right. My next thing that I was going to ask about was what happens, say I have a loved one that's on the priority one wait list, and they are reached out to and told, okay, you were chosen to be awarded one of these waiver slots that have come available. How is that going to happen? What should I expect? And what would be my next step?
So the waiver slot allocation committee, they will typically have a certain amount of FIS slots and maybe one or two community living slots. Back to what I said before, if you need that community living slot, we've already said, you are looking for a place. You currently actively looking for residential services.
That's right.
So, but let's talk about an FIS slot for a second. So let's say you're a priority one and you really need personal assistance or respite service, and the allocation committee has 4 FIS slots, and as you said, they say we're going to give it to Joe Smith. And so the first thing that happens is they contact us. The slot allocation committee contacts us, our CSB, specifically our case management supervisor, to give us the results of the slot. It is then up to the CSB to move that process forward. It's not going to be, because we have to go back to that person, Joe, I think it said Joe Smith, and say, you have been awarded an FIS slot. Do you want it? And 99 times out of 100, they will say yes. It is possible, by the way, that you can say no and and remain on the waiting list if that slot does not meet your needs. If you are offered a CL slot and you turn it down, they're going to take you off the waiting list. Just so you know,
Okay.
because you should not be needing a CL slot and what am I trying to say? Like you should not need it if
That's
if
right.
you're asking for one. So anyway, let's say the case management supervisor probably, or maybe or the service coordinator, or somebody from our CSB will reach out to Joe and say, "Hey, Joe, great news! You've been offered an FIS slot. Do you want it? Yes or no?" And they say yes. And then there's some back end paperwork that we've got to do to get them enrolled. We have to enroll them through the waiver management system. So we do all of that enrollment. Really, it depends on what their current level of case management is right now. So some folks are getting active case management and we know them very well, but we'll still set up another meeting and talk and meet with providers to say, okay, you said you wanted personal assistance. Let's meet with Moms in Motion and get those services started. For some folks, if they're on monitoring, which means we hardly have any contact other than once a year, we have to have we really need to get to know them a lot better and have a big meeting about what their service level needs are. But really, to answer your question, like what do I need to do as the client? It should be in the hands of the service coordinator at that point. Like, okay. If you've not heard anything forever, that's likely a problem. Like after you've been told you've gotten the slot, it should not be a tremendous amount of time. Once you get the slot, the clock really starts ticking on when these slots are allocated. The department does not like slots that are allocated and sit there. When we had COVID, we had so many of these sitting out there that were allocated but never used. So they really want us to allocate these and get things started. Even if services don't start, like even if we connect them with you guys, but we can't find somebody, that is better than us just not contacting a provider and getting those services started. So the service coordinator will be reaching out to the client and their family within a short period of time and say, "Hey, you got the slot. Now let's get together and have a service plan meeting and talk about, for those that know, it's called the Part 3. It's like, okay, here are your goals. What all do you need help with? Which of these providers is going to help you with it? Those type of things like that. So the CSB service coordinator is going to reach out to anybody that gets a slot and kind of drive that whole process forward. You should not, the client themselves should not feel overwhelming responsibility to do it. If anybody drops the ball, it's definitely not the client. It's the service coordinator's job is to run that ship, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, that makes perfect sense. And that will lead us right into the next question, which, in making sure that you said that they would be reaching out, it is always important for the clients or anyone that's on a wait list to make sure that DMAS and the CSB and your service facilitation provider always have updated information for you. So updated phone numbers, updated addresses, updated emails, because those things change quite frequently with people. And if we can't get in touch with you, then that can deem to be an issue if you are awarded a slot or if you are needed for any reason that pertains to services. We want to be able to contact you. So make sure that you reach out to all of those people and keep them updated if any of your information changes. So that's just my public service announcement there.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, because especially for some people that are on monitoring, we say this a lot, is when we do the initial screening, like one of the reasons someone may go from a priority 2, which again, we don't look at them really, to a priority 1 is the health of the caregiver, right? So if a caregiver, I'll say something terrible, falls down the steps and really cannot provide care anymore, that would change their status. Now, I'm also reasonable and I say, listen, I know your first call is not going to be to the CSB to say, hey, my status has changed. But that is important. And if we want to know that so that when slots are allocated, we know your updated information. Or people still don't tell us a lot of things. We find out after the fact, especially for those monitoring folks, sometimes that they've even moved. We don't find that out, but it is what it is. So good plug out of you. Let us know if information has changed.
That's right. That's right. Very important. My next question is that we have many clients at Moms in Motion that are on DD waivers in all areas of the state. What are some helpful things that our clients and others that may be watching this can do to make sure that their ISP has been done prior to their appointment with their service facilitator, or at least 30 days prior to the end date? So the worst thing that can happen is for someone to have a lapse in services. It's never something that we want to see happen on, the CSV's front or on the service facilitation provider's front. We never want to see lapses in services for individuals. So what are some proactive things that you think that they could do to make sure, besides making sure we all have updated information to reach them, what's something else that they could do?
Yeah, I mean, that is very important, as you said. Like, it really does rely on both a service coordinator and providers. Well, the providers won't be able to do anything until the service coordinator moves on getting their service plan up and running. And then, of course, the service coordinator will rely on stuff from the service of the provider. Please, hey, upload your Part 5. We really need that. So you're absolutely right. We try to avoid lapses in service. For a couple of reasons. Number one, we don't want people to go without services. And I'll give inside baseball. Anna and I were talking a little bit before it started. As this started and went live, is there's also financial stuff involved. Is that's how people get paid. So if services aren't authorized in time, we don't want to have to fix that mess of, okay, what was the screw up? How can it get fixed? Is it reconcilable? How does that work? So it's in everybody's best interest to get these done properly. And I will say I give a lot of credit to everybody involved in this crazy system for most of the time getting this done properly. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of names to keep track of, and everyone has different dates on when their service plan is and all of that stuff. And so I'm going to start with the excuses part here. Is we have a lot. There's turnover throughout the entire state. We have new service coordinators all the time trying to learn the system. I'm sure, Anna, you guys have new staff that are trying to learn the system and whatnot. And I know this is a cliche thing to do, but we just need to make sure that we're talking. Like if the service facilitator doesn't know the name of the service coordinator, let's fix that issue. Or if the service coordinator does not know, okay, well, who do I contact? Blah, 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 about getting this done on time. That's an issue as well. I mean, other than putting a big circle on the date, which you can do. But again, it goes back to, there's so many, if you're carrying a caseload of 30 or 40, if you're really short staffed, that's a lot of things to keep track of. A lot of single points of failure, to say, oh my God, I went on vacation. I cannot believe I forgot to open up that service to do the service plan or whatnot. I'm sure that stuff happens. Really, I'm going to go stick to that cliche thing is know who your folks are and do your best to talk to them. It probably behooves everybody to talk a little bit more during the year so that you don't get to that last 40 days and go, I got a call from Joe Smith. Who the heck is Joe Smith? It's like, oh, Joe Smith, he must be calling about Mary's ISP. I'm just finishing that up, so to speak. So
yes,
I get the issue. I wish there was an easier solution, but there's a lot of moving parts to keep this up and running.
That's right. And John and I were talking before the call, and definitely just to reiterate what he was discussing, that there is lots of turnover in any human services role. And so we are definitely not, immune to that. We deal with it on in our company as well as with the CSVs as well. And so the individuals that work for both organizations really have to have a heart for the clients that we're serving. And they do the work because they care about these individuals and these families. And so oftentimes that means that there is turnover and that it can be a high burnout position. And John was mentioning some of their caseloads being in the 30s and 40s. And I know some of our team members' caseloads are well over 200. And so they are serving a lot of individuals and a lot of families. And so if a client or anyone is trying to make sure that everyone stays in the loop, it is best if they're sending an email, CC all parties on there. If you have something that changes with your information, make sure you reach out to the CSB and tell them. If you don't get in touch with your individual person that you're used to reaching out to, ask to speak to someone else and make sure that you are communicating to maybe their supervisor. Maybe you have been reassigned to a different individual. And that's the same with our organization as well. If you can't reach out to your service facilitator, you're not getting a call back, you're not getting an email back, we have a general info box, info@momsinmotion.net. You can always send us an email there, and we're going to get you linked up with the right individual to get you back on the right page. So just another little public service announcement to make sure that we're all staying in the loop and serving the individuals that we serve to the best of our ability. So thank you for answering that. And that was very helpful. My next question is about environmental modifications and assistive technology. Oftentimes we'll share on our social media pages, and we'll share with individuals that have services that they do have these benefits with the waivers. How does that work with the DD waiver? What's the process to using those benefits? Say they wanted to get a new iPad or communication device. What's the best timing? Who should they reach out to? What documentation do they need to bring to you?
I quick looked behind me real quick because I have an iPad sitting right there that just was delivered today. We do tons of iPads. So assistive tech and environmental are available under all three of those waivers, the BI, FIS, and CL waiver. They are available from the second you get your waiver slot, basically. Excuse me. They are authorized up to $5,000 a calendar year, not a service plan year, a calendar year for each one of those, not total. So 5,000 AT, 5,000 for environmental modification. I cannot speak for other CSBs, but I will speak in general. It's the process is not very difficult. Many of your CSBs are the provider. So Harrisonburg-Rockingham is a provider of that service. So if you need, let's say that iPad, you contact your service coordinator. Well, first of all, even if the CSB was not the provider, call the service coordinator. All you should have to do is say, I need an iPad, and they should be able to walk you through the process. But I can tell you that what we're going to need is we're going to need some sort of an assessment, usually by a SLP, speech language pathologist, or if it's for let's say something that they might need a PT assessment for. They don't like to approve anything now without some sort of who is the expert that says that they need this. That's mostly for assistive tech. So if you can, again, that's another thing you can either get on the front end, or you can work with your service coordinator to say, hey, I want an iPad. What do I need to do? I'll give you an example how that would work with an iPad is we'd say, go to the speech and language center and get connected with them, do an assessment. They may say, okay, this person would really benefit from an iPad with this ProLoco speech communication app. And then the service coordinator works with them to say, okay, we need this iPad, we need this app, which a lot of them are hundreds of dollars. We need a case for it. And then we go ahead, once it is approved, then the provider, which in this case is us, purchase it and hands it to the person. So from the standpoint of what does the client need to do, should not be anything more than talk to your service coordinator. And say, please, this is what we need. Environmental mod works pretty similar. That's a lot of ramps or widening doorways or whatnot. You probably will just need a doctor to sign off on it, and then we do a justification, and then it's the same thing. We get it approved. We assure that it is going to get paid for with some sort of contractor, and then then they start the work, and then the way it works is that we pay for it, and then we bill Medicaid on the back end. So you don't have to wait for anything other than getting it, once it's approved, then we go ahead and order the stuff and get it out there fairly quickly.
Well, that's
But we've got
great.
a lot of stuff throughout the years, a lot of iPads, but yeah, lots of lots of different devices and modifications and stuff like that. So
Well, that is great. We have found that that is one of the most underused benefits of the waiver because people don't know, how to go about requesting it, or they don't even know that it's an option for them. And that goes with the CCC Plus waiver as well, not just the DD waiver. But
right.
oftentimes people don't know all of the benefits that they are provided with, and so we want to make sure that you get full access to those benefits. And if that's something that you think that you would qualify for, then by all means, like John said, reach out to your individual at the CSB and see if that's something that y'all can get working on.
Yeah, and that reminded me real quick. So,
Yeah.
I was gonna say at the very beginning, if you are not familiar with the My Life, My Community part of the DBHDS website, so just Google My Life, My Community, it'll pop right up. That does have the list of all the waiver services under each waiver. I could not memorize them all, but it will tell you what is all available. So like Anna said, you may look at it and go, I had no idea that this was available. It'll be there on that website. It's My Life, My Community. Caveat on that is there are things listed on there that exist on paper only, but we cannot find anybody to provide the service. So so it would be great if all of those were there, but some of them are not. But anyway, My Life, My Community is a list of all the waiver services and under which waiver they are available.
Great. So it's worth looking into, and they'll be able to tell you in your locality if that's something that would be available to you or not.
Yep.
Thank you for that. My last question was just in regards to the CSB in general. What other services are offered through the CSB, or what other services could their support coordinator assist them with?
Sure. And I have to say, Anna, you are killing it with the time. We budgeted an hour and you were like on the last question with 10 minutes. What a great job. So this is really going to depend on the CSB. So our CSB, I know this is a waiver service, but our CSB does not provide any day support or residential services. Other CSBs, if you live in Charlottesville, they may run their own residential programs or whatnot. So this is going to get moderately confusing. Okay. So if you come to the CSB and you have an intellectual disability, regardless of your waiver eligibility, regardless of whether you have a slot or not, we can open you up for case management. If you say, I just don't know what's available, can you help me with food stamps? Can you help me with this? I have these needs. We can provide case management for you. So that is a service that we can provide, waiver or not. Confusingly so, if you come in with autism, we can screen you for waiver. You can be eligible for waiver, but our department is not allowed to provide case management. We cannot bill for just people. We cannot bill for non-ID clients for case management for us, even if they're waiver eligible. Which is confusing, and I'm not asking you to understand why that's the case, but that is the case. So if someone comes in with two brothers, one with intellectual disability and one with autism, without waiver services, we can only provide case management to the one with ID. What we typically do for kids with autism is if they are appropriate, they can be served on the mental health side for kids. So we have a lot of kids receiving mental health case management with autism on our mental health side. To further the confusion is if the person with autism gets a waiver slot, then we have to serve them with case management back on the DD side. So again, if you have an ID only diagnosis, we can provide case management. If you don't have that ID diagnosis, we can't provide case management unless you have one of those waivers, which again is very confusing to folks about why somebody has case management, someone doesn't have case management. Once you do have case management, whether it's with DD, whether it is with ID or whether it is with child mental health, they're the ones usually every CSB has a resource list about, okay, like what is available. Do you need like ABA therapy? Are there camps that you can go to? Are there for older adults, like what are some housing needs that exist totally outside of waiver, like housing assistance and all of that? We do a whole heck of a lot of that. So that's really the benefit of the case manager. Unfortunately, for that one group, we're not allowed to provide it on the ID side. All of that to say, your mileage may vary depending on what CSB you go to. Well, that part is true everywhere, but in terms of what services are available, provided by each CSB, the best answer I can give like that is contact your local CSB and say
right.
what services are available. Some run their own groups, some people do other stuff like that. So.
Great. Well, great. Well, I thank you so much. And
Sure.
I just want to say again, thank you. This is John Malone, and he is with us today from the Harrisonburg-Rockingham Community Service Board, and he is the Director of Developmental Services there. And just to reiterate, we've talked about a lot of things, and we're super thankful for all the insight you've given us about the DD waivers. But if anyone out there is watching this and they do think that that's something that their family member would qualify for or could benefit from any of the services that we've discussed today, feel free to reach out to your local community service board. Everyone has one in Virginia. There's different ones in every part of the state. Or you can contact us directly at Moms in Motion, and we are able to give you the number to reach your CSB in your area. We can push you in the right direction, point you that way to get you set up with those folks and in your area of the state. And so thank you again, John. Yep, you got something?
That reminded me really quick is that there is a website called the Virginia Association of Community Services Board, VACSB.
Okay.
And there's a very, very simple thing there that you put in your address and it will tell you what your local CSB is. So
perfect.
That's an easy way to do it too. Yeah.
So VACSB. So if you will look that up, then you can find your local CSB as well. So thank you again, everyone that watched this live stream. We're very thankful that you have sat with us and listened to these questions and answers. And we hope that we've provided insight for you. Do keep in mind that this was recorded on June 11th of 2024, and that in the waiver world, things change daily and weekly, monthly. And so things can change. So if you want up-to-date information, you're always able to give us a call at Moms in Motion, or like John said, reach out to your local CSB. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.